It's funny, isn't it? How life, or in my case, lives, have a twisted sense of humor. I sat there, nursing a lukewarm coffee, the steam doing little to warm the chill that had settled deep in my bones since before. Across the cafe, at our table, Lily was laughing. That same tinkling laugh, the one that used to make my chest ache with a fondness I now recognized as naivety. She touched Alex's hand, a light, lingering caress. The exact same way she used to touch mine. A flash, sharp and unwanted, seared through my mind. Lily, her eyes wide with feigned innocence, and Alex, his face a mask of concern, telling me it was all in my head. The way they'd looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching. The affair had been a brutal symphony, each note a fresh betrayal, culminating in a crescendo that had utterly destroyed me. My business, my friendships, my very sense of self. All gone. But this wasn't that life. This time I wasn't the trusting fool, blinded by love and loyalty. This time I'd been reborn, memories intact, a spectator to my own past tragedy. "I've seen this movie before," I murmured into my cup, a bitter smile playing on my lips. "But this time I won't be in the audience. I've already rewritten the script." My phone buzzed against the worn Formica tabletop. A simple, unassuming notification. Phase 1 complete. I took a slow sip of coffee, the taste acrid and strangely satisfying. Let them have their little scene, their encore. I had a whole new production in mind. My apartment was modest, deliberately so. A mirror image of the life I'd had before, the life they'd so spectacularly helped me lose. Every detail, from the slightly too small couch to the temperamental plumbing, was a carefully chosen piece of the stage I was setting. It had taken meticulous planning, a year of careful maneuvering since I'd woken up in a hospital bed, gasping for breath, the phantom pain of a life lost still echoing in my chest. The doctors had called it a miracle, my recovery from the accident. I knew better. It was a second chance, a chance to not just survive, but to orchestrate. The cast of my personal tragedy was, unfortunately, all too familiar. Lily, my ex-girlfriend, the woman who'd sworn eternal love while simultaneously slipping into my best friend's bed and, as a delightful bonus, stealing the business idea I'd poured my soul into. She was beautiful, undeniably, charming when she wanted to be, and utterly, devastatingly, self-serving. In my previous life, I'd mistaken her ambition for a shared dream, her possessiveness for passion. Now I saw the cold calculation in her eyes, the way her smile never quite reached them unless it served her purpose. Then there was Alex, my former best friend, the brother I'd never had, or so I'd thought. He'd been my confidant, my supporter, the one I'd turned to when Lily and I had our first inevitable cracks. He'd listened patiently, offered sage advice, all while systematically stabbing me in the back. His betrayal had, in some ways, cut deeper than Lily's. Love could be blind, but friendship? That was a conscious choice. A bond forged in shared laughter and late-night conversations. A bond he'd shattered with casual cruelty. He'd fed Marcus, my then boss, a steady stream of lies, painting me as incompetent, a thief of concepts that were, ironically, mine to begin with. Claire. My own sister. That was a special kind of sting. When the world had crumbled around me, when I desperately needed family, she'd sided with them. "You're being too sensitive, Mark," she'd said, her voice dripping with a pity that felt more like contempt. "Lily and Alex would never intentionally hurt you. Maybe you misunderstood." Her denial, her refusal to see the truth, had been another nail in the coffin of my previous existence. She'd always been easily swayed, eager to be part of the in crowd, and Lily and Alex were certainly that. And finally, Marcus. my former boss. A man whose ambition outstripped his loyalty, whose ear was easily caught by whispers and insinuations. Alex had played him like a fiddle, and Marcus, eager to believe the worst of an employee he perhaps saw as a threat, had fired me without a second thought. The stolen concept, polished and presented by Lily and Alex, had become their ticket to the success that should have been mine. The perfect storm. That's what it had been. A confluence of greed, jealousy, and weak character that had drowned me. I remembered the crushing weight of it all, the despair that had become my constant companion. My phone rang, jarring me from my reverie. Claire's name flashed on the screen. Speak of the devil. Mark? Hi. Her voice was overly bright, a forced cheerfulness that always set my teeth on edge. Guess what? It's my birthday next Saturday, and I'm having a little get-together. Just close friends and family. You should come. I leaned back against the threadbare cushions of my couch, a slow smile spreading across my face. Perfect. The stage was indeed being set, and they were all playing their parts beautifully. Claire, that sounds great, I said, injecting a warmth into my voice that I was far from feeling. I'd love to. Oh, wonderful, she gushed. Everyone will be so happy to see you. Lily's been asking about you, you know. I think she really misses you. She seems to want to reconcile. I almost laughed. Predictable. So utterly, beautifully predictable. Oh, really? I feigned a flicker of interest, a hint of the old, hopeful Mark they all remembered. Well, that's interesting. Yeah? Claire said, her voice dropping conspiratorially. I think she regrets how things ended. Maybe you two could talk? Maybe, I said, keeping my tone carefully neutral. I'll see you on Saturday, Claire, and happy early birthday. I ended the call, the silence of the small apartment pressing in on me. They thought I was still that broken man, nursing a wounded heart, easily manipulated. They had no idea. They were walking into a play where they believed they were the stars, but they were merely puppets, and I, the director they'd long forgotten, was pulling all the strings. This time the tragedy would be theirs. Claire's apartment was buzzing, a hive of forced laughter and superficial chatter. The air was thick with the scent of cheap wine and expensive perfume. I navigated the crowded living room, a polite smile plastered on my face, playing the role of the slightly awkward, endearingly naive Mark they all remembered. It was a costume I wore with practiced ease, a second skin I'd inhabited for far too long in my previous life. It didn't take long for Lily to find me. She drifted towards me, a vision in a dress that probably cost more than my month's rent, her eyes wide and filled with a carefully constructed remorse. She touched my arm, her fingers cool against my skin, the same gesture, the same calculated vulnerability. Mark, she whispered, her voice a husky concoction of regret and longing. I've missed you. I miss what we had. I let my expression soften, allowed a flicker of what she would interpret as wistful pain to cross my face. Lily, I said, my voice quiet. It's good to see you. Across the room, I saw Alex watching us. His jaw was tight, a muscle twitching almost imperceptibly. Jealousy. Good. That was part of the script, too. He'd always been possessive, even of things or people he had no right to claim. His insecurity was a weapon I knew well how to wield. Later, after a few more drinks and some carefully steered small talk, I found myself alone with Lily on the balcony. The city lights spread out below us, a glittering tapestry of indifferent lives. I've been thinking a lot about you, she said, leaning against the railing, her shoulder brushing mine. About everything. Have you? I kept my voice gentle, encouraging. I made mistakes, Mark. Huge mistakes. She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering. I was confused, scared, Alex. He was just there. A convenient excuse. Always. I'm working on something new, I said, as if it were an afterthought, a casual shift in conversation. An app concept. It's pretty exciting. I think it could be big. I let a hint of genuine enthusiasm creep into my voice, the kind of passion I used to show her when I was bubbling with ideas. Her eyes lit up, a predatory gleam I now recognized. Really? Tell me about it. And so I did. I spun a tale of innovation, of untapped markets, of a revolutionary user interface. I painted a picture of success, of fortune, all wrapped up in a concept that sounded plausible, even brilliant on the surface. I watched her absorb every word, her mind already racing, calculating. Later that evening, tucked away in a quieter corner of the apartment, pretending to be engrossed in a conversation about sports with one of Claire's oblivious friends, I overheard it. Lily, her voice low and urgent, talking to Alex. Oh, he practically handed it to me. It's brilliant, Alex, untapped. If we can get this to Marcus before Mark even thinks about it. Alex's voice was a skeptical murmur, but I could hear the greed warring with his caution. Are you sure, after everything? He's still hung up on me, Alex. He's naive. He practically begged me to take the idea. This is our chance to get back on top, especially after that last project fizzled. My heart gave a theatrical little pang. Or rather, I allowed my face to show one when, a few minutes later, Alex approached me, Lily hovering anxiously behind him. Mark, Alex began, his tone attempting a sincerity that was almost laughable. Lily was just telling me about your app idea. It sounds interesting. I feigned surprise, then a dawning, painful realization. You told him. I looked at Lily, my voice laced with a carefully crafted hurt. Lily, I trusted you. That was for us to discuss. Mark, I just thought, she began, her eyes darting between me and Alex. It's okay, Mark, Alex said, clapping a hand on my shoulder, the gesture feeling like a brand. We just want to help. Maybe we could even collaborate. Pitch it to Marcus together. You know, for old time's sake. I let a beat of silence hang in the air, letting the betrayal sink in, or so they'd believe. I don't know, I stammered, looking down. I need to think. They exchanged a quick, triumphant glance. They thought they had me. Again. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly fathom, was that the brilliant app concept I'd so generously shared was a Trojan horse. It was designed to look impressive, innovative, and groundbreaking. But beneath the shiny exterior lay a fatal flaw, a core programming paradox that would cause it to crash spectacularly under any real-world stress testing. It was a concept so subtly sabotaged that only someone with intimate knowledge of its inner workings, or someone who had designed it to fail, would see the trap. A few days later, the inevitable happened. I received a smug text from Lily. Marcus loved the concept. We're presenting the full proposal next week. Wish us luck. I wished them all the luck in the world. They were going to need it. I imagined the scene. Lily and Alex, confident, preening, standing before Marcus and the board. Their voices filled with conviction as they laid out their vision. The initial nods of approval, the intrigued murmurs, and then the questions. The technical deep dive. The point where the beautiful facade would begin to crack, where the underlying flaw would become glaringly, embarrassingly obvious. The aftermath was even more satisfying than I'd envisioned. Frantic, desperate texts started flooding my phone. From Lily, Mark, it was a disaster. Marcus is furious. He said the core logic is fundamentally flawed. This isn't what you described. There must be some misunderstanding. We need to talk. From Alex. What the hell did you give us, Mark? Marcus is pulling our funding. He's questioning our competence. This is a nightmare. You set us up. I read their messages, a cold, calm satisfaction settling over me. I typed out a simple reply to both. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's terrible. Let me know if there's anything I can do. I leaned back, a genuine smile finally gracing my lips. Round one, complete. They were starting to unravel, just as I'd unraveled before. But this time I was the one holding the loose threads. Lily looked smaller. The usual confident tilt of her chin was gone, replaced by a slump in her shoulders. Her eyes were puffy, red-rimmed. She'd called me, her voice cracking, begging to see me. We were at a quiet, out-of-the-way coffee shop. Not our spot, never again. He's threatening to fire us, Mark, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stirred her untouched latte, the spoon clinking forlornly against the ceramic. Marcus, he said we're incompetent, that we embarrassed the company. After the presentation, it was awful. The questions. We didn't have the answers, it just fell apart. I reached across the table, my hand covering hers. A gesture of comfort, of solidarity. It felt like handling a venomous snake, but my expression was one of pure sympathy. Lily, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. The concept seemed so solid when I thought of it. A lie, of course. It was as solid as a house of cards in a hurricane. It's not your fault, she said, though her eyes held a flicker of doubt, a suspicion she couldn't quite voice. She needed me right now, or thought she did. We should have vetted it more thoroughly. We were just so eager. Eager to steal, eager to climb. Maybe I can help, I said, my voice soft, tentative. I've been doing some networking. I met this guy, an investor. He's always looking for new ventures, people with drive. Maybe if he heard your passion, your other ideas. Her head snapped up, a spark of hope, or perhaps desperation igniting in her eyes. Really, you think so? I can't promise anything, I said with a show of modesty, but I can make an introduction. He's a bit unconventional, but he gets results. Meanwhile, the fallout from the disastrous presentation had reached my dear sister. Claire called me, her voice shrill with accusation. Mark, what did you do? Alex called me. He said you deliberately gave them a flawed idea. You sabotaged them. I let a wounded silence hang in the air. Claire, how can you even think that? Why would I do something so cruel? They were my friends. Lily? I choked back a non-existent sob. I wouldn't. Well, they're saying you did, she insisted. Marcus is furious. Their careers are on the line, and it's all because of you. I swear, Mark, if you had anything to do with this, I'll never forgive you. Mom and Dad will be so disappointed. The threat of cutting me off from the family. The appeal to parental disappointment. Classic Claire. I don't know what to say, Claire, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I'm really hurt that you'd believe that of me. I played the victim card, a role they had forced upon me so many times before. This time, however, it was a calculated move, a smokescreen for my next act. The investor was an old acquaintance, a man named Sullivan, who owed me a significant favor from a venture in my previous life, a detail I'd conveniently remembered. He was an actor by trade, with a silver tongue and an uncanny ability to appear both charming and intimidating. He played his part to perfection. I arranged the meeting at a high-end restaurant, far too expensive for Lily's current predicament, adding to the illusion of Sullivan's wealth and influence. He listened to Lily's revised pitches, ideas she'd cobbled together in a panic, with an air of polite interest, occasionally interjecting with a sharp, insightful question that made her stumble. Then he leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Interesting," Sullivan said, his voice a low rumble. "You have potential, Miss Hayes, but the current market is volatile. To make a real impact, to guarantee the kind of returns I look for, you'd need a significant initial investment, more than you're probably thinking, something to show serious commitment." Lily's eyes widened. How significant?" Sullivan named a figure, a sum that was substantial but not entirely out of reach if one were desperate enough and foolish enough to pool resources. "And I'd need to see that you have skin in the game, that you can leverage your network, friends, family, people who believe in you." He smiled, a wolfish, predatory grin. "Think of it as a test of your persuasive abilities." Lily, desperate to salvage her career and reputation, took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. Over the next week, I heard snippets, mostly through a guilt-ridden Claire who, despite her earlier accusations, still saw me as a confidant when it suited her. Lily was a whirlwind of persuasion. She painted a dazzling picture of Sullivan's entirely fictional investment firm, of guaranteed high returns, of a chance to not only recover their losses, but to make a fortune. She convinced Claire first. My sister, always susceptible to the allure of quick money and terrified of her own dwindling savings after a few too many impulsive purchases, handed over a significant portion of her emergency fund. Then came Alex. His situation was more dire. He was facing eviction after Marcus had not only pulled departmental funding, but had also restructured Alex's position into oblivion. The promise of a financial windfall was a lifeline he couldn't resist. He scraped together everything he had, borrowed a little more, and threw it into Lily's growing pot. I watched from the shadows, a silent observer to their burgeoning greed and desperation. Sullivan, under my instruction, kept them on the hook, asking for more documentation, more personal guarantees, dragging out the process just enough to make their investment feel real, tangible. Then, as planned, Sullivan vanished. Not immediately. There was a final email, full of promising projections and talk of imminent fund transfers. Then, silence. His dedicated phone line went straight to a disconnected message. The email address bounced back. The opulent office address he'd given them turned out to be a mail drop. The calls started, predictably, with Claire. Her voice was a hysterical sob. "Mark, he's gone! The investor! Lily said we gave him everything. My savings, it's all gone!" Then Alex, his voice hollow with disbelief and fury. "The bastard took everything, Mark, every cent. I'm ruined. I've lost my apartment. I have nothing." And finally, Lily. Her call was late at night. Her voice was devoid of its usual confidence, stripped bare, raw with panic. "Mark, I don't know what to do. It's all gone. Everyone's money. Claire's, Alex's, mine. They're blaming me. I need your help. Please. You're the only one I can turn to. You have to help me fix this." I listened, my expression carefully neutral. "Lily, this is terrible. Of course I'll help in any way I can. We need to figure out what happened, what we can do to recover their losses." I suggested a meeting, all of them, together, to discuss how we could help them recover. The stage was set for the next act, and the players, broken and desperate, were ready for their cues. This time, the trap was baited not with a flawed app, but with their own greed and the echo of their past betrayals. The air in my small apartment was thick with a potent cocktail of despair, accusation, and a faint, lingering hope that I was about to extinguish. Lily, Alex, and Claire sat on my mismatched furniture, looking like shipwrecked sailors clinging to a flimsy raft. "Mark, you have to help us," Claire began, her voice hoarse from crying. She'd aged a decade in the past week. "This is family money Lily lost. Mom and Dad's emergency fund was part of what I gave her. They'll be devastated." She conveniently forgot her earlier eagerness for a quick profit. Alex, usually so glib, just stared at his hands, his face pale and drawn. "I'll work off any loan, Mark, anything. I need to get back on my feet. I lost my apartment, my car, everything." He didn't look at me, the shame too heavy. Lily, ever the actress, tried a different tack. Her eyes, red and swollen, welled up with fresh tears. She reached for my hand, her touch tentative, pleading. "Mark, I know I've made so many mistakes. I messed up, badly. But I never meant for this to happen. I was just trying to fix things. For all of us. Please, you're so smart. There must be something you can do. For what we once meant to each other." I let her hold my hand for a moment, a cold, detached part of me noting the tremor in her fingers. I looked from one to the other, my expression carefully sympathetic. "This is a terrible situation," I said, my voice calm and measured. "And it sounds like this investor was a professional con artist." "He seemed so legitimate," Lily insisted, her voice rising. "The way he talked, the office he said he had, and the initial app idea that Marcus shot down," I mused, as if thinking aloud. "That was a blow too, wasn't it? Losing that potential funding from the company." "It was a nightmare," Alex mumbled. "Marcus implied we were idiots, or worse, trying to pull a fast one. He even mentioned that old project, the one you, Lily, and Alex pitched a couple of years ago," I continued, my gaze steady. "The one based on... Well, it was based on some of my initial concepts, wasn't it? The ones I discussed with Alex before I left the company?" A flicker of unease in Lily's eyes. Alex shifted uncomfortably. Claire looked confused. "That was a misunderstanding," Lily said quickly. "Your concepts were inspirational, Mark, but we developed that independently." "Independently," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Right. And Marcus firing me back then, after Alex had those private chats with him, about my performance and attitude?" "Mark, that was different," Alex protested, finally looking up, a flush creeping up his neck. "I was trying to protect you, smooth things over. Marcus was already concerned." "Concerned because you were feeding him lies?" I asked, my voice still soft, almost gentle. Each question was a carefully placed stone, and with each stone, the path to their other, older betrayals became clearer, not just to me, but to each other. I saw Claire's eyes widen as she started to connect dots she'd previously ignored. I saw a new layer of suspicion form between Lily and Alex. They were so busy scrambling to cover their individual tracks, they didn't realize they were collectively digging their own graves deeper. Mid-sentence, as Lily was trying to explain away another convenient misunderstanding about some missing research files from my old desk, my phone rang. I held up a hand, a silent apology, and answered it. "Yes?" I listened for a moment, my expression unreadable. "Excellent. That's confirmed then. Send over the final paperwork. I'll review it tonight." I paused. "And schedule a full board meeting for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Inform Mr. Marcus Thorne that his attendance is mandatory, and tell him to invite Miss Hayes, Mr. Sterling, and Miss Claire Richardson, yes, my sister, as my personal guests." I hung up. The shift in my demeanor was subtle but absolute. The feigned sympathy was gone, replaced by a cool, unwavering authority. The air in the room crackled with a new kind of tension. Lily stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. "Mark? What was that?" I leaned back, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. "That," I said, my voice calm and precise, "was my office confirming my acquisition of a majority shareholding in Marcus Thorne's company." Silence. Utter, stunned silence. Claire's jaw literally dropped. Alex looked like he'd been punched. Lily's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape that wasn't there. "You see," I continued, enjoying the slow dawn of comprehension on their faces, Rebirth has its advantages. Knowing which tech stocks were going to boom, which startups were going to redefine industries, it allows for certain strategic investments. I've been a silent partner, a shadow investor for quite some time, systematically acquiring shares, influence, all while you three were busy with your dramas. I remembered the thrill of it, the first time I'd used my foreknowledge. A small, obscure tech company destined for greatness. I'd poured every spare cent I had into it. Then another, and another. The returns had been astronomical. Money I'd used to quietly, patiently buy my way into the company that had once discarded me. "Marcus and I have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow," I said, my gaze sweeping over their stunned faces, "to discuss the future of the company, my future with the company. And since you all have such a vested interest in its recent performance, I thought you might like to attend." Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered in their eyes. A bailout? A reprieve? They were still thinking in terms of their old games, their old manipulations. The next morning, they arrived at Thorn Industries, looking distinctly uncomfortable, but trying to project an air of cautious optimism. Lily had even managed to pull together a business-like outfit, though the strain around her eyes was still evident. They were ushered into the main boardroom, expecting, perhaps, a scolding from Marcus, followed by my magnanimous intervention. Instead, they found themselves facing the entire board of directors. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of the table, his face a grim mask. I sat to his right, a stack of documents neatly arranged in front of me. "Welcome," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the large room. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." I gestured towards Lily, Alex, and Claire. "These three are here at my invitation. They have unique insights into some recent internal challenges the company has faced." Marcus cleared his throat. "Mr. Jensen has recently become our majority shareholder," he announced, his voice tight with a barely concealed resentment. "He has called this meeting to address certain irregularities." I smiled faintly. "Irregularities is one word for it." I then proceeded, calmly and methodically, to lay out my case. Evidence of their attempted theft of the flawed app concept. Emails, Lily's overly confident pitch deck, Marcus's own furious internal memos. Then, I moved further back, to the original theft of my business idea, presenting old concept notes in my handwriting, time-stamped digital files they thought long buried, even a sworn affidavit from a former junior colleague who had witnessed Alex accessing my private files. I detailed the fraudulent expense reports Alex had submitted, siphoning company funds. I outlined Lily's attempts to poach clients using proprietary company information. I even touched upon Claire's complicity, her willingness to spread misinformation about my character to protect her friends. With each revelation, backed by irrefutable proof, the color drained further from their faces. Marcus's initial grimness transformed into a cold fury. The board members murmured amongst themselves, their expressions ranging from shock to outrage. When I was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. Marcus finally spoke, his voice like ice. "Miss Hayes, Mr. Sterling, Miss Richardson, effective immediately, your employment with Thorn Industries is terminated. Security will escort you from the premises, and be assured, our legal team will be exploring all available avenues, including civil and potentially criminal charges for corporate espionage, fraud, and gross misconduct." Lily started to speak, a choked sob escaping her lips. Alex simply stared, defeated. Claire looked like she was about to faint. "Thank you, Marcus," I said smoothly, as if they weren't even there. Security guards who had been waiting discreetly outside entered the room. "Now, if you'll excuse us, gentlemen, ladies, I'd like to move on to my presentation regarding the company's 5-year strategic growth plan." As they were escorted out, their faces a mask of shock and disbelief, I calmly turned back to the projection screen, a new slide clicking into place. The past was finally, officially, history. My history, at least. Theirs was just beginning a rather unpleasant new chapter. A week. That's how long it took for the first of them to crack. Lily appeared at my apartment door, unannounced. The confident, manipulative woman from the cafe, from Claire's party, was gone. In her place was a wreck, her face tear-streaked and pale, her designer clothes rumpled. "Mark, please," she sobbed, her voice cracking. "You have to listen to me. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I never stopped loving you. Not really." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, my expression unreadable. I just listened. "I was confused," she went on, the words tumbling out in a torrent of desperation. "Alex. He twisted things. Marcus, he pressured us. But it was always you, Mark. Deep down, it was always you. I made terrible mistakes, unforgivable mistakes, but I can make it up to you. I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just give me a chance. Please." Her performance was flawless. The tears seemed genuine, the remorse palpable. If I hadn't seen this exact act, albeit with different stakes, a lifetime ago, I might have almost believed her. Almost. I said nothing. I just watched her, a scientist observing a particularly predictable specimen. Next came Alex. Not in person. He didn't have the courage for that. Instead, a series of desperate voicemails started to fill my inbox. "Mark, man, it's Alex. Listen, I know I screwed up, royally. But we were friends, Mark. Best friends. Remember? All those years. You can't just throw that away. What I did. What we did. It was wrong. I see that now. But we can fix this. We can rebuild. Please, just call me. Let's talk. Like we used to." His voice was heavy with a manufactured sincerity, laced with the pathetic whine of a man who'd finally faced a consequence he couldn't talk his way out of. The nostalgia he was trying to invoke, the shared history, it all felt like ashes in my mouth. Then, the grand finale. Claire. She didn't come alone. She showed up at my new office, the CEO's office at Thorne Industries, with our parents in tow. A strategic move. An ambush of familial guilt. My parents looked bewildered, worried. Claire had clearly fed them a carefully edited version of events, painting herself and her friends as victims of my ruthless ambition. "Mark," my mother began, her voice gentle but firm, her eyes searching mine. "Claire told us there's been some trouble, some firings. She's very upset. She says you're not being fair." "Son," my father added, his brow furrowed. "Business is business, I understand that. But these are people you've known for years. Lily, Alex, your own sister. Surely there's room for mercy." I invited them to sit. I offered them coffee, which they accepted, their movements stiff and uncertain. Then, in a calm, quiet voice, devoid of anger or accusation, I told them everything. Not the edited version Claire had spun, not the self-serving narratives Lily and Alex had tried to sell me. The truth. I started with the betrayal in my first life, the affair, the theft of my ideas, the way they'd collectively gaslighted me, dismantled my career, my confidence, my will to live. I spared no detail of their calculated cruelty, their casual destruction. Then, I moved on to this life. Their immediate, unthinking repetition of the same patterns. The attempt to steal the flawed app, the greed that led them into Sullivan's trap, their utter lack of remorse until they were faced with unavoidable consequences. I laid out the evidence, the timeline, the sheer, unadulterated selfishness that had driven their every action against me, twice. As I spoke, the expressions on my parents' faces shifted from confusion to shock, then to a horrified understanding. Claire sat rigid, her face pale, unable to meet their eyes or mine. The carefully constructed facade of her victimhood crumbled under the weight of undeniable facts. When I finished, a heavy silence filled the office. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father looked older, his shoulders slumped. We had no idea, Mark," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. She never said—" "She wouldn't," I said, my voice still quiet. "It wouldn't have served her narrative." Lily, who had apparently been waiting for her cue, chose that moment to make one final, desperate plea. She must have followed them, or perhaps Claire had orchestrated this last-ditch ambush. She stepped into the office, her eyes fixed on me, bypassing my stunned parents. "Please, Mark," she begged, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll do anything you ask. Don't you remember loving me? Don't you remember the good times? There had to be some good times." Her words hung in the air, a desperate, pathetic echo of a love that had been a lie from the start. I looked at her, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time, without the distorting lens of past affection or present vengeance. I saw not a monster, but a deeply flawed, pathetically predictable human being, driven by an insatiable need for validation and a profound emptiness she tried to fill with the lives of others. "I remember everything, Lily," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any discernible emotion. "That's the problem." I stood up, the movement signaling the end of the conversation, the end of their desperate appeals, the end of their presence in my life. "The answer is no." I walked past them, out of the office, not looking back. I could hear Claire starting to sob, Lily's choked gasp, my father's weary sigh. Their calls, their messages, continued for a while. I ignored them all. The door to that chapter of my life was closed, locked, and the key thrown away. There would be no more encores. 1 year later, the sun was a molten gold disk, sinking slowly into the Pacific, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and violet. I stood on the balcony of my beach house, a glass of something cool in my hand, the gentle rhythm of the waves a soothing soundtrack to the quiet satisfaction that had become my new normal. Revenge. It had been a driving force, a consuming fire that had fueled my actions for so long. It had served its purpose. It had cleared the board, reset the pieces. But it wasn't my focus anymore. It was a tool I'd used, and then put away. The emotional charge, the bitter satisfaction of their downfall had faded, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. The company, Thorn Industries, now just Thorn, was thriving. We'd pivoted, innovated, expanded. I found a genuine joy in creation, in building something new and meaningful. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs, bright-eyed kids with big ideas and a refreshing lack of duplicity. There was a clean satisfaction in helping them achieve their dreams, a stark contrast to the muddy, complicated emotions of my past. From the kitchen behind me, I heard Sarah's laugh, warm and genuine. She was on the phone, probably with her sister. Their conversations always a lively, affectionate back and forth. We'd met 6 months ago, a chance encounter at an art gallery. She was a painter, her canvases vibrant and full of life, a reflection of her own spirit. There were no games with Sarah, no hidden agendas, just honesty, laughter, and a shared appreciation for quiet evenings and good wine. It was simple and surprisingly wonderful. Occasionally, news of the others would drift my way, through the grapevine of distant acquaintances or public records. Claire, I'd heard, had declared bankruptcy. She was working an entry-level job in a different city, trying to rebuild her life from the ground up, humbled and, one hoped, a little wiser. Alex had moved back to his hometown, living with his parents, the swagger long gone, replaced by the quiet shame of a man who'd squandered every opportunity. And Lily? Lily was, predictably, Lily. Last I'd heard, she was attempting to attach herself to another promising, unsuspecting target in a different industry. Some people never changed. Their patterns were too deeply ingrained. I felt nothing thinking about them. No lingering anger, no triumphant glee, not even pity. Just nothing. They were characters from a story that had ended, a play whose curtain had fallen. They no longer occupied any space in my head or my heart. My phone, resting on the balcony railing, buzzed. A new email. A promising new business opportunity. A potential partnership with an innovative green tech firm. A smile touched my lips. The future. I took one last look at the spectacular sunset, a beautiful, ephemeral display. Then I turned away from the fading light, away from the vast expanse of the ocean that mirrored the past I'd finally left behind. Sarah was still laughing in the kitchen. I walked back inside, towards the warmth, towards the life I had painstakingly, joyfully built for myself. I slid the glass door closed, the click of the latch a small, definitive sound, shutting out the ghosts, the echoes, and everything that had come before. The stage was clear. The story was mine to write, and it was just beginning.